Why is YouTube giving me such a hard?
Check. Audio, can you guys hear?
Yes.
Check.
Yeah, he's finishing up the call.
Can you say that, can you say yes again?
Yes.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Perfect.
My job here is done. It's really crushed that. Figured it out, buddy.
Well,
Who's done?
some IT girls upstairs. No. We're all set.
Need anything?
I mean, pizza. Good enough.
Well, let's see if any stragglers.
See who we got, yeah. It's actually.
Good move.
For you or for the group? I mean,
Seems like it's.
we'll see how they participate.
Maybe. Dog?
Dude, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Truly. I mean,
That's so pretty.
little by little.
Ooh.
This is a 90-minute one, isn't it?
Yeah, we did not
Ooh.
use all the. I always say that, but then we like go.
Yeah,
But today we're gonna do some specific stuff to buyer, seller. We're gonna role play a little bit. I'd like to see who we get. Because like if we get anything, like Kate comes or we get Kevin, like anybody who's who's actively like been doing some of the things like that they had shared in the past, I think their insight's gonna be really valuable.
Did anybody see the Today Show?
No,
I happen to be getting my tires changed. I'm sitting in the car dealership and Today Show's on and they're talking about the new law coming into effect. So they brought this supposedly qualified expert on. It's terrifying. I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, this is what the consumer's gonna think now. And what he said was true, but he didn't tell the whole story. He didn't tell, you know, that buyers are having a hard time getting into houses anyway, and then if you're gonna put them having to pay their agent, and their opening line was, sellers are now gonna be able to keep thousands of dollars are due to the seller. And I'm like, shut up. Yeah, Today's Show.
Oh, yeah, yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Son of a bitches.
So, and I don't normally have the TV on, but because I was sitting there, and so the guy behind the counter goes, aren't you a real estate agent? Because he heard me on the phone. I said, yes, sir, I am. He goes, so what do you think about this? I said, well, he has given some true facts, but he hasn't told you the whole story. I said, there's a lot more to know. And he said, would you care to? Yeah, and I said, what do you want to know? Yes, I would. Whole room's full. I have the whole floor. To explain how real estate really works in this state and really what the whole thing is coming down to. And they said, well, how is that transparent? So that is a wonderful question. None of us can figure that one out yet either. But supposedly it's to be transparent. I said, in this state, we have always had buyer's agencies. We've always, compensation has always been negotiable. It's not a set amount, never has been, won't be. So I said, in this state, it really shouldn't affect anything of how we do business. And, they're like, really? After listening to that, you think, and I said, I know, that's what I said. They gave only half the story. But anyway, I thought it was cool. I had probably 6 people listening to me. So I handed out my card.
Go.
like it.
I just had somebody on a showing, told them, they were offering $4,000 in flexible compensation. So the buyer could use it for, to pay me or for closing costs or whatever. And I just got a text yesterday and said, hey, yeah, we decided to offer 2.5% buyer's compensation. I said, yeah, that was a smart move. So we'll see how that one goes, but this is a story of how that can backfire.
We'll talk about it. So I think you're gonna see people that, I think you're gonna see people that react a certain way, on the news, like, based on what they're hearing. And then I think you're gonna see, and then I think you're gonna see sort of they're gonna react to what the market does from that point. And probably normalization is months away,
Right.
right? Because it takes 100 days to learn the lesson. Really, right? If you go on the market and don't get any activity because compensation prices the buyers out of the market, it will take you weeks, or in this case, days. Then they're like, well, we're not getting the traffic we thought, or, whatever. And then, the reaction time, and then for that lesson to sort of ripple out, I think that's a few months away.
The only reason I bring it up is we have a bunch of people that have been educated now and they think they're educated. So we have to go in knowing, you better know your stuff when you walk in, because they're gonna blow you away with it. This guy talks so matter of factly, and they even brought up the difference between, what's the difference between a real estate agent and a realtor? They made sure they said realtor. And anyway, how they went into the description of that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But anyway, I bet you that's just we're gonna have to be ready with information and answers, because they think they're educated. No.
Yeah, well,
See.
it kind of goes to anytime you're hearing quote unquote news, now you're like, wow, like what you're hearing from any source, where do you trust it, right? Like where do you look at it, you trust it? Yeah. So we started, June, July, where we got together and we talked about value proposition and building your value proposition. We're gonna take that to the next level today. We're gonna do some practical things, some practice things. So we're gonna do some role plays. I'm glad I have Danny in the middle there. And you working on your license, right? And Danny, I'm gonna make you role play with me a lot because you're fearless like that. So I gotta behave myself. I wander when I talk, but I'm on camera here, so I gotta. So we're gonna do that, and we're gonna now we've got the documents, right? So like the PAR documents came out. And so we can sort of, it's a little less hypothetical. Now it's starting to be real, and we can start to look at like what's actually gonna happen. I got a shirt, I almost should have worn it. I was at Mega Camp, got in last night at midnight. I got this shirt. Sure, everybody gets to do the work. We're at the, if we're talking FAFO, we're in the FO stage right now, right? We got to do the work now, right? It's the hypothetical times are done. The times of taking for granted that what you've done in the past is going to work for you. New, God bless. You have the best gift, and that is no bad habits and no history, no precedent. One of the challenges that we're facing right now is we are in we are currently in, remember that Thursday in 2020? When the governor came on and said, real estate is done. Real estate's done.
I was at the house that day.
What's that?
Was to the house that day.
Me too. I actually, true story, I was going through my phone. I have like a ton of a ton of pictures. And I'm trying to go back and clean my stuff up. And I found the picture. I took a picture with me, and it was a selfie with me and my kid like this. She's got a big smile with a real estate sign. And we were in front of that listing, and I never posted that picture of that listing coming soon because it was like on that day, and I was like, I just don't want there to be a question of like, did Joe practice real estate after 5 p.m. that day? Like, no joke, because there was a lot of fear at that time, right? And so one of the things that happened in that period of time, and something to think about right now, is that we're losing our norms. When you have a loss of norm of when you're normal, you're going through life, swimming along, living. You're in homeostasis, right? And when your norm gets bumped and changed, you have to grieve the loss of your prior life, your prior knowledge, whatever was going on, and you have to make a conscious decision to embrace what's happening. But you don't have to do that.
Hey guys, just for everybody know, Joe will be on in about 5 minutes and we'll get started.
Hey,
I'm on now. So you have to grieve the loss, you have to accept that is happening, and then you have to make the conscious decision. And like I said, you don't have to do that, but life is going to be way harder if you don't. If you don't just say, okay, this is what it is, and now it's time to do the work.
Just do it.
Right? And so that's where we are, right? And actually the time since we got together the last time and talked about building value proposition, it was very much, and I was intentionally keeping it more hypothetical, keeping it more mindset, because now the changes are going on. Today is going to be a little bit more about the work. It's going to be a little bit more about execution. I am going to pull a little bit more of the mindset and concretely defining your value proposition, because exactly what you're describing there, and it is the narrative. Right? Well, what happens on the set of the Today Show? What happens? Describe it. Pretend let's picture ourselves there. Picture that there's a camera here facing this way, and over there is Hoda. She's still there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I take her book. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So they're over there, right? And this big camera's facing there. What are we watching happen? Call it out. Like, this is not a formal class. Like, what are we watching happen?
It's live TV.
We're watching live TV. Well, what's happening on that live TV? Entertainment, conversations, dialogues, scripting, narratives. They're telling a story, and they want to tell a story that's compelling because it improves their viewership, right? Guess what? If you don't know what your script is and your narrative and what your compelling story is going to be, their voice is going to be louder than your voice. And if you're not saying anything, then the only voice in the room is theirs. Thank God you were there. The people in the car dealership, right, are asking, well, is this true? Right? So that's going to happen to you now. Been happening probably for a little while, right? Oh, you don't vision anymore, right? Well, that's true both from a market perspective, like overall in the market. It's also true for you and your business. What is the value of your business? What does your business stand on? Right? And if you can't clearly articulate that in a market right now, then sorry, I know. You muted? Okay. If you're not articulating that now, if you're not building that narrative now, then when you go into a room and have to talk to a customer, God forbid you have to do that work, right? Then what will you say that will justify the money you're about to ask for that they've just heard other people say they don't have to pay? The difference between that the difference between what they think they need to pay and what you are worth is your value. Right? So we're gonna talk about it. It's unavoidable. We have to talk about your value, your brand promise. We've started to build a case for that before. We talked about your superpower, right? And so, there. So we talked about a couple of these things last time, right? So catching up, who was with me last time? Cool. So talk to me, like we talked about, I put the 4 things up there that I think kind of summarize, but like anybody want to share a little bit about what you thought about afterwards, the day after we got started? Yeah.
I love the video. I communicate from in words to hours instead of hours to end. Actually doing a video on that right now. Let's start with why.
Yeah, the book that he has an entire book about it called Start With Why, but yeah, the video that we did, a 2-minute video. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Yeah. Anything else? Any other takeaways from any these 4 things or anything that stands out from the time we were together?
After our class, like 2 days later, I was listening to someone who talks about frequencies and voices and it was all about communication. And he said the most powerful thing we can do is be authentic when we're doing that. And he gave scientific proof why that is true. And I thought it was such a grand slam hit after your thing. And I put it at the top of my list because I am that.
Yeah.
And but I just thought I've never put that maybe that in words before. But he said it's the most powerful communication skill we all have. If you believe what you do is the best and you go in with the best, that's authentic and you can't lie. You can't lie your way through that.
Some trust. So just as a reminder, and I actually don't have it on today, but we talked about trust. And trust is built up of 3 pillars. It's curiosity, empathy, and authenticity, right? So to that point, right, to talk about the grand slam of bringing it home, it's like trust is going to be built from curiosity, authenticity, empathy, and authenticity. Sorry, so curiosity, empathy, and authenticity. We are going to talk today about the ideal buyer's consult in today's world, not 7 months ago's world. And in today's world, if at the end of your buyer's consultation, you have to have a conversation about justifying the money, because now it's negotiable, by the way, it always was, but now we have to talk about that, right? And we can't avoid it. There's literally disclosures now we have to give that say very blatantly that it's negotiable, which by the way, it always was. But if you don't clearly articulate that because you're curious, that you have an understanding of the customer's needs, then when you go and ask for the money, it's relative to the value they think you can deliver. And if they don't think the value you can deliver is all that great, then what do they think you're worth? Not that much. So your choices right now in real estate are going to be, do you clearly articulate a strong value proposition and increase your value, or do you race to the bottom on discount? That's the honest truth conversation to have in this room. And we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of brand identity and brand promise and value proposition delivery. But pricing is one of them. And ask yourself, why is Walmart huge? Right? That's them, right? And so Walmart's huge, but you know who else is huge? Amazon. Amazon's not necessarily price driven, they're process driven. Mercedes still sells a lot of cars. They're not price driven. They're value driven. They have a high sense of value, right? And so you can succeed, you can choose. Are you going to be the Walmart or are you going to be the Mercedes? And we'll dive into that a little bit more today. We talked about fiduciary versus functionary. And just for anybody who wasn't in the first conversation, there's actually a really cool t-shirt that I did not get, so I was busy buying the Do the Work shirt. But there's a cool t-shirt about it says fiduciary and it's crossed out, and then I'm sorry. It says functionary and it's crossed out, and then it says fiduciary. So in the 30-second bullet point answer, what's the difference between fiduciary and functionary work that we do as real estate agents? Come on, y'all.
Fiduciary is the trust and the quality of the relationship, whereas the functionary is just doing the routines.
Okay. You're headed in I like the direction you're headed in, there's more to it, there's like a legal aspect to this.
Confidentiality.
Okay, so fiduciary means you have some obligations to represent their interests, right? Confidentiality, what else?
Cold.
Cool.
Cold.
Yeah,
COLD.
yes, say, like,
Care, obedience, accountability, loyalty, and disclosure.
there you go, yes, so from a fiduciary perspective, you have an actual obligation. You can be held negligent or not, right? But we have a license that we sign, right? That goes to the state. And they say you have permission to do this. You don't have to rescind that, by the way, if you suck. So just remember that. So we talked about that. And we talked about the ideal customer experience, sort of mapping that out at a high level. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that today. And we talked about buyer and seller services, just sort of getting a little bit more granular. So we started at the high level, right? And then we worked our way down. So I want to ask you guys, and we were already starting to share war stories, and we're like 15 days in, 2 days until the NAR stuff is like, released upon the world or whatever. We'll talk about that. That was an awesome quote that Phil Jones shared yesterday at Mega Camp that I'll share with you. But what are you seeing? Let's hear it. What are you seeing right now? Panic.
Yeah.
Is that because of Ukraine? Because of Iran? Like what
All the
panic?
Facebook real estate groups that I'm in that are usually posting deals
Uh-huh.
over the past. Hey, I got clients looking for this. I got listings looking for clients. It's been, oh no, the world is burning. What do I do? What do I do?
Perfect.
Sneaky ways to get around this.
Perfect. Love that. I love that for us.
Yeah.
But we should get their market share.
Yes. See, it's time to retire.
Go ahead.
It's not done.
No, let them go. That is
Yeah,
their
they'll
time,
retire.
not my time.
Like people calling them. Like I have literally had agents calling the line. Asking for advice. On the changes,
Really?
that their own places aren't giving them the. I'm like,
I was in a condo.
no, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Happened a few times. I'm like, well, they don't know I'm not an agent. They're
Yeah.
just run that for.
Harrisburg last week, and there were recruits in the room. They're not having this conversation. I wasn't teaching that, I was teaching. But I'm just telling you, they're not having any of this conversation. They're not having goal setting conversation or the NAR conversation. So what else? What are you seeing transactionally? What's the dialogue coming from the customers? Yeah.
I have a listing that has been in the works. They're going through repairs. We started 2 months ago. We're projected to go active probably in a month.
Okay.
So I called to check in with her yesterday just to see how repairs were going. If she needed contractors, anything like that. And she's like, well, while I have you on the phone, I just read that I guess I'm timing this right because now I'm not going to have to pay commission to the buyer's agent. And I did not want to sit there and have the conversation with her on the phone. And I asked her if I could stop over and I could check on her repairs and we could talk through the pluses and minuses of what you're optioning here and why it might not be in your best interest to do that.
Yeah.
So they're seeing things somewhere.
Yeah.
Today's show had it all.
Yes. So the conversations are happening and you need to know exactly how you're gonna handle it before. And I think getting face to face with them
Totally.
is the best way to do it and take data. Like we should all be looking at days on market and data right now.
Anybody writing this down?
Yep.
Like, right now, while the change is occurring, you need to be watching the data more than ever. I'm always an advocate for it. I don't think there's ever a class where I don't tell you this, but I think looking at the data on a daily, at the worst case weekly level, and just having a pulse on the number of things. There's a few things to look at. New on the market, price reductions, pendings, closings. Like it doesn't have to be like a full hour-long market digesting, thing. But yeah, just something, yes.
And I think if while you're watching days on market, don't be afraid to call agents and ask what their compensation is for commission, because that's important while you're tracking this data.
That's a great give. Because like but you won't know who to call to ask if they're being impacted by that if you're not paying attention to the numbers. But if you see properties with days on market ticking up and you're like, doesn't look like a terrible house, but it's not moving, and you call the agent and say, hey, I'm just curious, like I saw your days on market, I have a question for you, what's the compensation that you guys are offering? And they're like, $1 and a Snickers bar. Okay, right? Because now you carry that into your next listing appointment, right?
The other thing, Joe, I think that does, it makes you look like the expert, that you do know what's going on when you can go in with that kind of data right in front of you and hands-on stuff.
Yeah, Kara, I asked you to unmute. I'm sorry, I was muting you because I wasn't sure if you wanted to say something, or if you were just chit-chatting. You good? Kara seems good. Okay. So are you doing anything differently? You should be. We're gonna talk about that. You should.
I noticed, I mean, I've always talked with a buyer's agent. I always sat down with them and went through the entire buyer's agency agreement. I didn't do it electronically because I wanted to make sure they understood what it was. And I went over, because when I took my licensing 3 years ago, they stressed, you need to have that signed before you go into a showing.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be required, but I made sure that they understood what they are responsible for as far as compensation.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure they had some questions instead of just sending it electronically.
So there was a panel yesterday. That's great. There was a panel yesterday of agents that are doing like 500 plus deals at Mega Camp. Like, they had one thing in common. They do their business on purpose. They are not just slapping together agency, shooting it out by dot loop, like winging it. They, like, Jeff Glover was on stage. Anybody know who Jeff Glover is? Right? He has Glover U. So he has a whole coaching and educating side. Like, that dude can tell you, he's like, at like 6.5 minutes into the appointment, I'm reviewing this. Like, he is so dialed in. I'm telling you that the winners of this market are going to be that type of agent right now. That you're gonna win because you already were doing it right. And if you have a plan, you know that, like, I'm gonna be doing buyer's agency conversation. I know I'm gonna be reviewing it. I'm gonna specifically dive into the value that I offer and then trading the value that I offer for the compensation that I'm asking for that value. If you're already doing that on purpose, you're a step ahead, because the agents that are calling Julie, by the way, and are like, what do I do? Are not, we know that, because they're not even in the same ballpark, and there's only so much business. There's only so much business. In fact, we've seen the I don't know, 15-ish, 20%-ish reduction in the amount of units that have, especially in the last 2 years, we've really seen it constrict back. We're probably in a place of somewhat level of stability here. I don't think that we're going to see a dramatic increase or decrease in the unit count that sells over the next 12 months in our marketplace, give or take. So what you see is what you get. Go get your piece of this pie. It is what it is, right? But you're going to be going against those people that are calling. So again, it goes back to what's the narrative, what's your language skills, what's your conversation? Yeah.
What I'm gonna do you have those buyers that you've had for 6-8 months because the market is whatever it is. I'm gonna get them to come in and go over the Bright document. I'm gonna use that as a tool to get them back in, because we haven't really seen each other since that first meeting, unless we're out looking at properties.
Yep.
Get them back in to go over that Bright document that they need to sign, and just kind of reiterate the changes and really getting them keyed in, because I might not have looked at a house with some people for two or 3 months.
Totally. I think that by the way, the most valuable, you said a lot of really valuable things already, but I think one of the most valuable things was getting face to face. We're going to talk about that, because you are about to have, when we talk about this from a fiduciary versus functionary perspective, fiduciary is a high impact relationship. It is a high impact relationship. We have been behaving in a very low impact way. If you're letting Zillow babysit your clients like it's daycare, and you're just not communicating with them, not controlling the narrative around what they want to look at, not checking in on them, not getting feedback on what they're seeing, not being the conduit of value, but letting somebody else deliver the value, if that's the way that you're behaving, and then you're expecting a high value paycheck, that day is gone. So if you have a high impact relationship when you're acting as a true fiduciary, that like if you had a super important legal case, would you want your attorney to be like driving, distracted, kids in the back seat, talking to you for like a sort of a scattered, shitty, 7-minute call? Or would you want undivided attention, Zoom meeting, maybe you're at his office, sitting down, like, this is what's going on, high impact, the ramifications of messing this up are really big, like, right? So are you behaving, which way are you behaving? No judgment if you have kids in the backseat, by the way, like I do that, but that, I mean, think about that. Are you bringing them in? Are you having a consultation? This is a business relationship we're about to enter into, and this is what it looks like. So, because otherwise they're getting their feedback from the Today Show. Is anything that, but one of the last bullet point, and I have no idea how to back up, because now I have any questions or challenges anybody that wants to make sure we cover today? Is there anything that you came here hoping that we would talk about?
I might as well ask it now, is for somebody who's brand new,
Mhm.
simply, why should I go with you? Because you're brand new, you don't have any experience, so why go with you?
I'll let you battle that objection out later.
I would say when I read the panic comments, a lot of people are on one side saying, well, my client can't afford the 3%. I'm gonna call every single agent, ask if they're offering it, and if they say no, then I share that with my client and we don't go home.
Yeah.
And all the other agents are saying, well, screw that listing agent, send in an offer that includes your 3%, make the seller pay for it, just see what sticks.
You could be missing an opportunity if you don't try.
Yeah. But so like, just to be really honest, like this whole point of this was that the Department of Justice is on a warpath for transparency and negotiation. They're like, that's what it is. And like, to your point, Pennsylvania's fairly ahead of the curve nationwide. We already had buyer's agency agreements. There are states that didn't at all have buyer's agency as a separate document. There are states that didn't, the state that this occurred in was Missouri, is where the big case was filed. Missouri had a 1-pager. It's like, right, like this, they was on purpose. We are way ahead in terms of PAR, in terms of our local board. So we already have a lot of the resources. It's the narrative is nationwide, but like we were already there for. But that's what it is. It's about transparency. They want the ability to negotiate. They want the consumer to have a fair shot at a fair deal. And if you are hearing some of these realtors that are like, well, I want to be able to, like, I was talking to an agent not in this market, and they were like, well, like we just need to be getting 3%. You're the problem. Like, you're the problem. Because if you're walking into an appointment and you're like, yeah, it's 3%, like that's what we do around here. Like, that's literally what the Department of Justice is trying to shut down. So if you're thinking that you're gonna be, hey, like this is what it is or whatever, and you're not gonna have, it's not a dialogue, it's not transparent, it's not negotiable, that's not gonna fly. And from what I'm hearing and seeing from both NAR and PAR, and Gary said it on stage yesterday, if you choose to not embrace these changes, you got your one pass. $1 billion has been paid out, give or take, or will be paid out on behalf of all of the realtors from all the different brokerages that took the hit for us. Not that they fell on the sword, they've made their money, but like, right, like that's the reality. $1 billion being paid out on behalf of real estate agents. That's the one pass you got. Because the next time, if somebody comes along or a state investigator, by the way, I mean, Ryan, I'm sure has also been through this, I've been through this, where you're sitting down with a Department of State investigator, it's a very unsettling feeling to be in that position. When they come knocking on your door because a consumer says, I signed this paper, but they didn't tell me that it was negotiable or whatever, right? The pass is done. And now it's you, and it's like lawsuit city. Because now it's a very litigious environment, because they already unlocked that this is a problem. There's been a proposed solution, and if you choose not to participate in the solution, that is not okay. So I just want you to be very, very clear, like I mean, I'm telling you, as somebody who's invested in your success and playing ball, Ryan probably will love to hear this. I'm telling you that, like, you have to play by the rules. I have a little slide that will even say that. I incorporated more of the rule follower things than I normally would, because it's just not, like, it's not gonna be okay. Ryan's not gonna want that call. Broker
We
record.
already know that, I mean, spotlight's on us
Yeah, for sure.
for a while. And we've heard rumors about secret shoppers. So and they're gonna be the ones that the state are hiring or planting, see if we're doing our jobs right.
Yep.
So classes like this is why we do it, just to help you all.
Yeah.
Keep you out.
So, yeah.
I had an open house about a month ago, and it was actually on my own listing, and I'm really glad it was my own listing. And I know I had a secret shopper just because the questions and where they kept trying to direct me to talk. I know it was a secret shopper. I've never had that experience before, but I know that you're gonna be getting some weird phone calls that are gonna try to direct you into conversations that I would be dotting my i's and crossing my t's.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So a couple of things we're gonna hit today. We're gonna talk about your brand promise and value proposition. We're gonna go back, we're gonna button up a little bit of the conversation we started last time. We're gonna talk about incorporating the latest NAR requirements. I have a roadmap that they provided. So if you are not, if you haven't just browsed HAR and NAR, get like time block an hour, and listen, for me, this is super painful. I want to be running and gunning. I talk about like income producing activities. You got to do it. Spend an hour, time block it, and go on the PAR and our website. Click on the FAQs. Just like read the stuff. There's so much, way more than we're going to cover in an hour. And I'm not Peter Ruth, and I'm not a broker. Like, so like I'm covering it from a perspective of like literally how do we just like what's the thing we can get into motion. But there's some compliance side of things that you should spend some time doing. So we're going to talk about incorporating the NAR requirements into buyer. We're going to talk about incorporating NAR into seller conversations and appointments, and we're going to real play on how to have those conversations. Literally, how, like, you're in a public setting. Someone says, "What's the story about this?" What do you say? Right? You have a buyer that walks into an open house. By the way, there's two perspectives on the open house, right? There's do you have to have them? Oh, every single person sign. NAR says no. PAR might say probably best practice, right? So we're going to be feeling some of these things out. And if you're looking for concrete answers, every turn, you're not going to get them right now necessarily. So it's just about doing the best that you can with the information we've got. So Phil Jones said this yesterday. He said, your value is only valuable if it's appreciated and appreciating. We're going to talk about pink unicorn floaty. So can anybody picture this, right? They like the little pool floaties, and you're like in it, and it has a unicorn head and a big rainbow tail, right? Would anybody pay $1,000? $1,000. I got a pink unicorn floaty.
Depends on how much I can make in social media.
Like turn it into a TikTok. Yeah. So pink unicorn floaty. I have one for $1,000. Anybody want to bite? What if we're on a cruise ship that's sinking? Anybody down for $1,000?
Sure.
Do I have a highest and best? Anybody want to pay more than $1,000 for the pink unicorn floaty? Yeah, right? Like it's a bidding war at that point. Well, why?
Money don't float.
What? Say that again?
Because the current situation's good.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. What is the pink unicorn floaty doing for you that's worth $1,000?
Because the situation is different, the need is different.
Okay. So the pink unicorns
You're solving a problem.
solving a big problem, right? Like the problem, like if you think that you're like, dude, $1,000 pink unicorn floaty to float in my pool, you're crazy. A pink unicorn floaty to survive, $1,000 is the best $1,000 you'll ever spend. Right? So the value of something is related to its ability to solve a problem. Your value proposition is tied to your ability to solve a problem. So when you think of any sale, by the way, I would define a sale as an exchange of value for a solution, right? like salespeople are not wizards. They just happen to connect people with a need to a solution. If you are trying to sell a vacuum cleaner to somebody that doesn't own a house, that's not a very great connection. You're not gonna make a sale, doesn't matter what you do, right? But if you're trying to sell a pink unicorn floaty for $1,000, I think the best place to be selling that is on a sinking cruise ship. I wanna be a pink unicorn floaty vendor on that cruise ship, right? So these are the 4 pillars of value proposition, and I want to share this because I think that you have to get really clear on where you're going to stand in the marketplace with your value proposition as you're going into your buyer agent and sellers listing agent conversations. So number one place that number one place that a brand creates value proposition is in experience. And so anybody know, this is a super very weird trivia question, but does anybody know what Starbucks's mantra was as they were growing? They want, and this wasn't from Phil Jones, but this was something I studied super interesting. They said they want to be the 3rd place. People have home,
Work and start.
people have work, and they have Starbucks. That was Starbucks's perspective. They wanted to be the 3rd place that you went. So Starbucks has seating. They have a cool vibe. They have nice decoration. They have music. They have outlets where you can plug your little laptop in and plop down there and buy a drink at 11 and buy a snack and a drink at 1, and by 3 o'clock you've had 1,000 milligrams of caffeine, but you're still there, right? That's Starbucks. That's their vibe. So it's experience. So they wanted to create the hip coffee vibe, and they created that experience. But then you compare that to Dunkin'. So Dunkin', literally they're saying, and I wrote it up there, is America runs on Dunkin'. What do they want you to do?
Run in, run out.
Run.
Quick stop.
They want you to run, right? They like, if you go to this Starbucks over here, like there's like maybe 2 tables left in there. Right? Like I don't know if you gone over there, but it's like I live in the neighborhood behind here, so like I'm popped in there. But like compare Dunkin', we have all 3 of them right here. You have Indy, you have the Independent, Restless, you have Starbucks, you have Dunkin'. If you had to meet somebody to sit down, which one are you gonna go to?
Starbucks.
Starbucks, maybe. Restless is banging.
I would go to the independent.
I go to the Independent. I just happen to love their coffee, right? So their quality is really good. But that tells you everything. So Starbucks wasn't trying to drive their value proposition on providing a great experience. Theirs was about process, really. It's about convenience, literally run in, run out, right? So that leads us to the second one, which is process. So the value proposition of Amazon is based on process. They're not a sales company. They are a what company? Starts with an L.
Logistics.
They are a logistics company. Amazon is about process. You could order something on Amazon today and it will be at your house tomorrow before you get home.
That's true.
Think back 15 years and imagine that I told you that that was possible. They have completely reinvented process as a value proposition. Right? The rideshare, like, so let's not be taxi drivers, by the way. In our industry, let's not be cab drivers, because think about this, the disruption, and this is the thing to think about. Our disruption right now is very much like that. Ride sharing apps came along and they streamlined process for transportation like it had never been done before. Jay, you ever ride in a taxi?
Yes, I have.
There's no particular reason why I called on you, but I'm just, so.
Age.
Could have been, I was just experience, we'll just say experience. So what was it like to get a taxi? You had 2 choices. You could call ahead, right, schedule it, or you could do what?
Walk out on the street, flag it down.
Yeah, that's awesome. Talk about a competitive market.
Yeah.
Right?
Fight for it if you went to the second one instead of the first one.
That absolutely would happen, right? And the consumers were like, I think there might be a better way. And the ride sharing apps were like, there sure could be a better way. We're gonna digitally connect it. You'll know when they're coming. In fact, we'll draw a little map. You'll see where the car is. You don't have to worry, like, because if you called ahead.
Well, they might sure, they might not, they might drive by you or pick a fare up that's closer.
100%.
Waving, and
Yeah.
the light can go on not available.
You're like, I need to go to the airport. I need you here at 8 o'clock. 8:07, you see them like pick up somebody down the street that was like waving frantically and it's not you, it's now you're not making it to the airport. Right? Ride sharing changed all that. Well, that interruption to the norm, because the taxis, by the way, were like freaking out when the ride sharing apps came, right? Oh, there's change. It was customer demanded. We are in a little bit of a customer / government demanded change right now, right? Purpose is a value proposition that's, if I do business with this company, I feel better about myself. So anybody know Tom's value proposition?
Buy one, give one.
Buy one, get one, but do you get it?
No, give one to a kid in need in a third world country.
Right,
Yeah.
buy one, give one, right? So for every pair of shoes you buy from Tom's, what are you saying?
I thought you meant the gas station.
If you buy a pair of shoes from Tom's Shoes, then they give a pair of shoes to people in need. Their pricing isn't necessarily like earth-shatteringly cheap. It's competitive, but not crazy. But like that, there's like a greater cause. And if you go to Tom's website, before you even go to shop, the first thing that pops up isn't shoes, although sometimes it's like a sale. It's like a picture of a kid getting a pair of shoes. So they're tied to a greater purpose. One of the things I think we have the opportunity to talk about more and don't in KW is our purpose. We have, like, I was in a difficult transactional situation. I was sitting in the Austin airport yesterday, dealing with this difficult transactional situation. And you know what I was talking about? Y4C2Ts. What's the win-win? What's the integrity about this? What do we do for the customer that makes it right? You know what I mean? And like, we have that. And if we're not talking about it, and if you don't have a purpose attached to your business, you're probably missing out on a potential value proposition. And then the last one is pricing. And this is where we have to be careful, because in an absence of the other three, the customer is going to assume that your value proposition is price. If you go to Walmart, what's the huge sign say? Every day,
Low prices.
it's literally what they ride and die on. Low
Prices,
What's that?
falling increases.
They have that, yeah, they like at the end cap falling price, everyday low price, right? Everything is about that. And the prouder you are of price, the more confident you are, or the more confidence you create in the value of what you're selling. And I think we have to be really careful that as we go into role plays and as we're talking about how we deliver our value proposition as agents and sell our service, that we are proud of what we're charging in whatever you charge. And I'm not here to tell you whatever number you want to do, right? But if you're apologizing for the number that you're talking about, you are screwed. Does Mercedes apologize? Does Ritz-Carlton apologize? Hey, I'm so sorry that you paid $600 for this night. Yeah.
I learned something about pricing a few years ago, and it holds true. They say there's only two advantageous positions about pricing. You're either the lowest or you're the highest. Everything in the middle, you're just competing. If you're the lowest, people see value in your price. If you price the highest, people will try to find value to justify that price.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, I have a tiered commission structure for my listings, and I get more 7% listings than I do anything else.
Listen to that and take that to heart. So there's an awesome Harvard Business Review study on this. They did this with insurance, car insurance quotes. And I think it was either State Farm or Allstate. And they had the assumption that everybody would choose the cheapest car insurance rate. It was 11% of consumers chose the cheapest car insurance rate. 11%. They would offer the same thing, maybe change the wording, fancier graphic, whatever. People weren't taking the lowest. So to your point, Like, right, like, given the choices of logging in and looking at different car insurance rate, people won't go into the low one. So if you do the tier, and we're gonna talk about how to deliver a value, like, so that's a perfect segue actually into a listing value proposition. Because what are you gonna offer that's worth 7% unapologetically?
Think about what you just said. He said he has a tiered offering.
Yes.
That tiered offering, I'm sure you break down what
Mhm.
each brings you, right?
Yep.
So you're covering all four of your value proposition by offering them options.
Right, so there might be a price focused one of 2%, whatever you're gonna charge, right, a lower one. But you might lose experience, you might lose
6.75.
something, right? You might lose something else or whatever. And then now,
And then
like,
FOMO kicks in.
100%. And by the way, you are the shining example of what the DOJ wants. Because the customer should be in the driver's seat. With you running the engine. Right? But they can decide which direction to turn the wheel. Like you say, hey, you're totally, and you know what? Maybe I'm not the one for you at 6.75%. That's okay, right? Like, I'm sure there's an agent out there that's at Walmart. Right? But I don't go to Walmart if I want to buy a Mercedes. So that's cool. We'll talk about more of that, more.
Well,
Yep, sorry.
we can talk about it more. I've been thinking about the tiered commission offerings. And where I struggle is I don't know how to not do the best and offer the best no matter what. So that's where my internal struggle is with
I
that.
think that's different than what you actually provide or what they that you're provide.
Yeah.
Like you might still offer a 7% experience at 5, but they don't know that up front because you're offering these tiered structure.
Nicole, I want to challenge you. That goes right back to functionary and fiduciary. You have to, fiduciarily, you're not going to lower yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you're a high quality agent, right? You have to ask yourself functionarily, is there anything that you would leave off, right? So it like, I don't know, you can share as much or as little as you want to share about it, but like, you know, it's like, are you doing a staging walkthrough recommendation? Are you doing professional photos at, right? Photo, different level of photos. Are you, hey, at a 7%, you get $100 boost on social media, and at 5%, you don't, right? Like, so again, you can share as much or as little. as you
Yeah,
want.
I mean, we have the Move for Free program. So I go over the Move for Free program long before I even bring out the tiered structure. They get excited about the Move for Free program. And then when I go into the tiered structure, they see that they only get the Move for Free program with that 7% option. They sell themselves on the 7%.
That's a huge.
He's literally doing the next part of this, which is designing your listing presentation, because what you just gonna guess, and I've worked with Jeremy and his team before, and I know you're a stud in terms of building out sales intentionally, but like, I'm gonna suspect that your listing appointment looks like needs analysis, well, building trust, needs analysis, getting the customer to that point where then when you start to talk about what you're offering, it's at a point where it's relevant to them at a high level, just guessing. And then when you come around and actually talk about compensation at the end, it's selling itself, just like you're describing, because they've already told you what's important to them. You're sliding something across the table that matches what's important to them. And now you're the pink unicorn floaty in a sinking ship. And $1,000 is a no-brainer, right? Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
That's fundamentally, I mean, like, results tell you what the process looks like. I don't even need to know what his process looks like to necessarily tell you, because what he's describing tells me that that's what his process is. You lead with trust, which means curiosity, empathy, and authenticity that allows you to have that structural real estate conversation. Because like Move for Free program, right, or whatever he's offering, doesn't matter if the pain's not there or they don't have the emotional needs that are ahead of that, right? But when you have that emotional connectivity, you're authentic, like you were describing that you are, then when you come around and have that logical conversation of what you like, if you lead with pricing and lead with pictures, that's worthless. You're throwing logical things at somebody and they're about to enter into the most emotional transaction of their life. That's totally backwards. But if you lead with emotion, tell me what's important to you. How, like 6 connected questions: who, what, when, where, how, am I, right? If you lead with that and then they start to open up and you say, wow, that's really great. I appreciate you sharing all that stuff with me. Hey, you know, I actually pride myself in being able to match people who have the same needs that you're describing there with a solution that makes the move feel completely seamless. In fact, I even offer a Move for Free program. And then you were talking about how you wanted this to be easy and convenient, whatever, right? Again, just putting some scripting out there. that matters then, but if you're just like move for free, you might have a little bit of bait at the top of the funnel that says like learn about our for free program. That's just to create the conversation, but you don't want to lead with the logic in this, in the appointment. We'll talk about that in the listing presentation stuff. I'm gonna challenge you guys. I want to give you like 3 minutes to do this. I want you to write a 1 to 2 sentence promise of what you and your brand stand. This is just sort of a putting a bow on the conversation we started before, the conversation of talking about value proposition. Again, remembering back to these 4 things: experience, process, purpose, and pricing. And I want you to ask yourself, what could your customers expect? What is your brand promise in a 1 to 2 sentence? Coach. Anybody have a maths coach? Do you have a maths coach? Maths coaching through KW. I used to be one. You know, I do one-on-one executive coaching now. Let's talk about value proposition. I'll literally charge more than 3 times. I literally charge more than 3 times what I used to charge as a maths coach and get it now. It's a value prop. Like, it's like, I just had somebody email me back and like, yeah, can I get it? I was like, it's mind blowing, but you have to believe that you're worth it. It's a very mental side to value that, and it's one of the reasons why I keep us on this like mental side of things so long. Practical stuff, like you could sit down and in a 3-hour time period, you could map out what your 3, 4, 6% commission structure could look like. It's very logical, but like believing that you're worth it and being confident, right? So being confident that you're Mercedes level. It's a different vibe. Yeah.
What did you say kind of coach you were, Matt?
I was a MAPS coach.
What's that?
It's a Keller Williams it's like higher level. It stands for mega agent productivity.
Oh.
So the threshold would be agents that had a minimum of $150,000 in BCI a year.
Oh.
So I was coaching teams that were doing 200, 300, 400 deals a year.
Oh.
Yeah.
They have lower level coaching though too. They have more entry level coaching too.
They do. Yeah, there's like group coaching. There's like other things that are available. All right, so cool. So I have Kara in the chat, and it's a huge decision. I genuinely care and know the process, and I will make it this as simple. It's as simple as I possibly can. My respect for this is to make sure you feel comfortable all the way through. Bashira says, my company brand slogan is built on human connections. Developing relationships matter. I love that. So here's the thing, and this is Phil Jones is very cheeky. He's like a British dude, he has a fun accent. And he was like, if you think that like I provide great service is going to be enough to get you a unique value proposition or a unique brand promise, you're not going deep enough. So just as a random survey, anonymous, except that I'm going to ask you to put your hands up. Who here thinks that they provide great real estate service? Okay, who here thinks they provide great communication? Can't, if you look down at your brand promise and it's like, I provide great timely communication, okay, cool. Right? America runs on Dunkin'. Are you clear? Are you decisive? Are you proud? Right? Do you tell people what you stand? So, okay, anybody else want to share? I'll make you go.
So home buying and selling experience fun and exciting by simplifying the process and taking on the challenges that you don't want to.
Solid. We take on the challenges you don't want to. That's good. Who wants to go? Do you just set the bar high?
I kind of went the opposite route. I went a stress reduced experience. What does that mean? Instilling confidence through education and an open conversation.
Also good. Also good. Who else? You're too new. I'm not gonna let you go. You don't know your everything.
I can share it.
You want to check? You got to check.
Committed to excellence.
Okay. I think I
It's 3 words, but that's where I'm starting, I guess.
think it's a great start, to be honest with you. I think but like so think about that from a brand perspective, right? Think about like I always successfully use clues. I always like to reverse engineer what we know works. You look at Dunkin', America runs on Dunkin'. But what does that mean? It means they have to have they're speedy, like what's the speed like? So if you go in Dunkin', by the way, and look at them, if you order a coffee, if you look at the screen, there's a timer on the screen. It's true at most fast food restaurants because like the only way that they can define fast food is to literally deliver it fast. So what do? They measure time. They don't measure quality. Nobody at McDonald's is like, well, that Big Mac doesn't look great. They're like, get it out in 90 seconds. That's their like truly, right? So for you, like define excellence, and then how do you design your coffee shop to deliver excellence? What does excellence look like in practice? So I'm not telling you have to answer that today, but like that as you're building your business, like be intentional about that. Anybody else want to go? Or we can move through. All right, cool. Thanks for the online shares. I appreciate that. All right, so let's talk about buyers. So I want you to do this exercise next. This is identifying your buyers that your value proposition is relevant to. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to identify 3 groups of people who are potential buyers that you are highly qualified to help. Maybe before I finish this exercise, I want to read this. If you shoot with specialism, it is easier to pick up generalisms. If you shoot for generalisms, nobody with a specialist need will call you. Right? So if you say problem solving, is that you?
Stress reduced experience.
Stress reduced experience. Okay, cool. So think about who out there in the world as a buyer, they have a stressful need that you can solve so that your messaging speaks to that and attaches your brand promise to an audience that gives a shit about it. Right? Does that make sense now? So thinking about that. Who out there, just picking 3 unique groups of buyer-specific audience that you are highly qualified to help. By the way, let's think about your like move for your program. Like, who cares about that? That's a generalism.
Anyone that needs to move that doesn't want to do it themselves.
There you go. So then now we start to, okay, cool. So who would care about that messaging, right? Like letting you take that to the next level. So that leads to the second point, which is thinking of the 3 biggest problems in those people's world that you're able to solve. Ooh, fair housing, but just saying. I wouldn't disagree.
Experience though?
Yeah. Yes. It's people with more experience. for thinking about it. And this is relevant because you have to connect the messaging. We talked about the narrative, right? We're looking at Coda over here. And the narrative that's out there right now is going to be about one of the value proposition items, which is price. And if you don't have clarity on who you help and how you help them, and have clarity on what value you bring to those people with your solution, if you're not doing that, if you're not creating a narrative around that at the top of the funnel, by the way, which is your social media, your lead generation, the mail you're sending, the emails you're sending, if you're not communicating that, you're not going to get those people who you can and should help into your funnel at all. And I don't know about you guys, but like, it's really hard to buy and sell houses without people, right? So if you don't have leads that you're converting into appointments with a relevant message, you're not going anywhere. So now that allows you to connect that brand promise value proposition to a specialist approach and allows you to identify who you help and how you help. Okay. I'm gonna let you guys finish that. Does anybody have any notes that comes to mind as we just did that and as I kind of called out the, move for free, and then we started it leads itself down. It's like, oh, cool. Like, so maybe I'm gonna do a little bit of work for Jeremy here for a second, but I'm thinking like people who want to move for free, or people who may want the easy route. Now I might pull tax records of people who own homes longer than 10 years because those people have acquired a bunch of crap. And now, right, like, it's like, okay, cool. Like, let's start to think about that from a demographic perspective of how do I communicate with that audience? Because you got to target that audience, and then you got to tell that audience something that they care about. Does that make sense? And then when you walk into the appointment, you are uniquely positioned to win that conversation, to win the business. Anybody want to share anything else on that? Specific to buyers? Online, I think we did have a share. I'm gonna see if I can pull the chat. Okay. Kara says HOAs, downsizing, and divorcing. So that's a little bit of the who. Now you got to think about how you're uniquely positioned and like what problems you solve for that group and how you do that. All right. So now we're going to take that to the next step. I want you, and we're gonna take this. We're going to immediately go into a role play. I want you to write down 4 to 5 steps of your ideal buyer process from lead to under contract. Lead to under contract. And one of the reasons, like you stand out here because you just said, I've been doing it this way for a while. And that way that you describe is that you are having buyer consults. You're specifically reviewing buyer's agency agreement. That's the type of stuff that I need to see on this list.
You wanna let them eat then while you're doing this?
Yeah.
You'll lose their focus.
And so write down 3 to 5 bullets, and then come on over and grab a piece of pizza. And we finish up while we eat. We're gonna go into real play, role play in a moment after we do more buyer work. So build your ideal buyer process, lead to under contract. So lead to consult, maybe, or first conversation, needs analysis. Like, what do you do? Come into the office, meet at a coffee shop. The answer is not meet them at a house. Unless you're getting buyer's agency signed before you walk in the front door. Julie, thank you so much. Can we get a small round of applause for Julie? You're appreciated. This is where being a newbie is easy. He doesn't have pre-existing beliefs about what the process needs to look like. So he can just build his best version, clean slate. All right. So the second part of this activity that I want you to think about is, are you prepared already to execute on this? Are you prepared to have the conversations with the customers where you can articulate that these are the expectations now of what the process is gonna look like. If I'm a buyer and ready to role play with Danny, if I'm a buyer and we're having a conversation, let's talk about what that sounds like, right? So I'm gonna be the agent, by the way, you get off a little easier.
I deal with mostly sellers as you.
I know,
know,
I know.
for sure.
All right, so hey, I'm trying to think where we start this. Let's just start it like midstream of a conversation, right? So, hey, Danny, I'm so glad that we were able to connect here. You called me about, I'm gonna say on camera. You called me about 133 Main Street, right? Now watch, I'm gonna use the 6 connecting questions first. Because then I'm gonna articulate with the steps of my ideal buyer process. Danny, so tell me a little bit, what was it that drew your eye to that particular property? And just keep the role play back short.
Yeah, got you. Probably the price, like it's a pretty solid price for a 4-bedroom house. Which is what we've been looking for in the area.
Okay, so 4-bedroom house. What's significant about a 4-bedroom house?
Oh, we have 3 kids.
Got it. Anybody else other than the 3 kids who's gonna be important?
Yeah, my girlfriend Jocelyn.
Okay, so your girlfriend, 3 kids, and you're looking for a 4-bedroom property. Anything particularly important about location that you called it up that's 123 Main Street?
Yeah, we're trying to stay in the suburban school district.
Okay, so suburban school district, 4-bedroom for you, Jocelyn, 3 kids.
Yeah.
Ideal scenario, tell me, when would you love to be like feet up on the couch living in this new house?
I mean, school starts here soon, so we'd like to get this done here sooner than later. I'm not sure if doing it before school starts is super reasonable because we only have a few weeks, but I mean, we'd like to be in and comfortable by, midway to the school.
Awesome. Can I just ask a kind of a broad, but maybe a little intrusive question? Why are you looking to move?
We're at a point now to where we live separately and everything's getting integrated, mixed family and everything. So now everyone's comfortable and we're making the leap. So it's pretty much like you rent or buy and just kind of like makes more sense financially to buy.
Okay, cool. So do I have a pretty good picture? Is he now emotionally engaged, by the way? We're like talking about blending families. This is serious shit, right? So now I have all of that. I've earned the right for what I'm about to do. So Danny, this is a big move for you. I'm hearing that from you, but this is a big important thing. You and Jocelyn, like integrating your families and a new chapter, right? And time's ticking a little bit too, from what I'm hearing. Makes me feel a little bit of pressure. I gotta make sure I bring my A game for you, right? So what I'm thinking here, Danny, the ideal setup for us would be, I want to make sure that as we're looking at any property, whether it's 123 Main Street or anything else, that you and I are on the same page and that we're set up that if you fall in love with a home, I can help you with it if it's the right one. Okay. The danger here is that if I just take you out to 123 Main Street right now and you love it, we have to go backwards on our process because we're too far ahead. So what I'd love to be able to do is sit down with you and Jocelyn, if we could do that, and make sure we hammer out all the things that are important to you. I have a pretty good idea already here, just based on what you've shared with me about 123 Main Street and kind of where you are in the process. But I'd love to be able to sit down and really understand how I need to show up as a real estate agent to make this a win for you. And also go through what it looks like to have a real estate agent on your behalf. Because having an agent in your corner is like having, it's like having a trusted partner on the journey who's there to guide you for all the steps, right? So I'd love to sit down with you, go through that, do a little bit of paperwork for us to make sure that we're on the same page. And then from that point, I'll make sure that we've got all of the I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of funding, in terms of all of the logistics of making sure that when you find the right house, it's smooth. So we'll meet, we'll do the paperwork, we'll get started with taking a look at 123 Main Street. If it's the right house, we'll be set up to move forward as fast as we need to. If it's not the right house, you and I will be on the same page and I can be your advocate moving forward from that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. How about tomorrow? Right, you see what I'm saying? I front load the emotional and it gives me the right logical second part. I was a little long and worried, I'm like winging it there, but the reality, like I'm also establishing value. I'm using words like trusted person in your corner, right? Because for me, like when I think of being a real estate agent, that's a value proposition that I want to believe in, right? Is being somebody's trusted. We always, Ryan and I always used to say trusted advocate, right? So if that's the case, then I need to know, and I need to offer a value proposition that's compelling for you to do what I'm asking you to do, which is to follow that process. I've also laid out a couple of milestones that we're going to be shooting for that are not only smart to do, by the way, getting a pre-approval, having a consult before the showing, but it's also now at this point required. So if you're not having a conversation that makes what you want to have happen sound like a good idea, they're not going to want to do it. There's going to be no value. Your pink unicorn floaty is going to be worth $4, just like it is at Walmart. But if I connect meeting with me with you and Jocelyn's future, that's $1,000 floaty.
Then you set expectations accordingly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is that cool to hear that? That's lead to appointment, by the way, in terms of your process. Lead to appointment or consult. Then you need to be prepared for consult to whatever happens next. And how are you role playing and preparing for your consults? So let's say now I go and I sit down with Danny, and it's like, Danny, let's just pretend I take those 6 connecting questions and I now go deeper on that, right? We're there. I want to be 15, 20, 30 minutes into that consult before I'm talking about logistics like move for free. I want you to be so engaged, because what do we talk about? Trust is developed through curiosity, empathy, and authenticity. None of those are speed, and none of those are shallow. They require depth and time of relationship development, right? So now I'm sitting with Danny. We've got, I'm deep with him, and I'm like, now I'm invested, because now I know like what's at stake if we screw this up is that you and Jocelyn don't get what you want, right? And so now we sit there. Now I say, okay, Danny, it's time to talk business. Okay, so as we're about to go out and look at properties, the landscape has changed a little bit in the real estate world, and to be honest with you, it's changed a little less than people think and a little more than it used to be 6 weeks ago. Okay. The reality is now that we have a completely open and transparent marketplace in terms of compensation for real estate agents. And what that means is now the listings that we go to look at are not necessarily going to advertise what they're offering. And so you and I need to make sure that we are in agreement on what this relationship is worth, what I'm going to provide to be worth that with you, right? And then as we go and we look at properties, we're going to see what they're offering. And if there's any discrepancy between what they're offering and what you and I have agreed to at this point, we'll tackle that on a case by case basis at this point. Is that fair? See, now I'm like teeing up the logical compensation conversation, but I'm doing it on the heels of a valuable conversation. Is this the first time you've heard a role play around this? No? Have you been role playing on this?
No, I'm scared to role play.
So, like,
I'm role playing my brain.
you're either practicing on your customers or you're practicing here. Right? Yeah. But like you get red just even thinking about it. See it. This is why we're here. Right. But we had to lead up to this conversation about how do we set these things up by doing all the other things. Because if I don't have a value proposition that is worth anything, then what am I going to ask questions about and set as expectations? Nothing. It's gonna be shallow, right? So understanding what that buyer consultation looks like, you know, I laid this out for you. This is not, I'm not saying this is the end all be all. I'm not going to die on the sword and say this is the only way to do buyer consults, but if I'm you, this would be a really great framework to either take a picture of or write down. So it goes back to what Danny and I just did, right? We set expectations, and by the way, those expectations are being set as early as the first conversation. I'm already planting seeds and laying the foundation for the framework that, hey man, we're gonna get together. I'm gonna get to know your situation a little bit more. That way I can serve you, work as your partners, get an agreement. You know, I'm already saying things like, if you do love it, what will happen? And if you don't love it, what will happen? If you don't love it, by the way, that just means I did one showing and now we're entering into buyer's agency. If you don't set that as an expectation in the first conversation, then what will happen is you'll be having a defensive conversation when you meet them at the house and they don't love it and they're like, okay, cool, we'll see you, I'll see you next time, or all right, now, like, thanks for the showing. And then they're like getting in your car, and you're like, yeah, but can I get a buyer's agent? Can I be your agent for life? And they're like, no, hey, see ya, right? But if I set it as an expectation, like, hey, super happy to get to know you guys and make sure that I can work alongside you. If I show you this house and you don't love it, I'd love to be in a position where I can serve you better moving forward and learn from the mistakes of showing you a house you didn't love. Now I'm already pre-closing them on buyer's agency. Anybody getting an aha with that?
Yeah.
That's in the first conversation. So setting expectations is critical, probably potentially one of the most important. Talking about curiosity, talking about empathy. Then you move into the needs analysis. So the difference between curiosity and empathy and then the needs analysis is there might be some things in the needs analysis that are purely logic. Like, Danny, appreciate you sharing with me. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Appreciate you sharing with me everything about what's going on with Jocelyn, the mixed house, everything like that. Let me ask you guys, have you guys talked about like the financial side of how you guys plan to make this purchase happen?
Yeah.
Okay, what, were you looking to go with cash or were you gonna do financing?
We're gonna do financing.
And do you have that already lined up or is that something that you needed help with?
It's something that we have lined up, but it wouldn't hurt to like get your opinion on this profession.
Okay,
Just said it's with property mortgage.
yeah, make me work, buddy, make me. Right? Pocket mortgage and we're totally committed. I got a great deal. Right? But like, so I don't, but again, going back to don't have high impact conversations with low impact relationship. If I say, Danny calls me on 123 Main Street and say, hey, what made you call me about 123 Main Street? Just throw by like the price points, 4 bedrooms, urban, great. So Danny, how's your credit? And Danny's like, we're not there, dude.
Yeah.
Right? We're at first date, not second date, not third date, right? So if you earn the right through the curiosity and empathy and get to the point where you can start to have some of those other more logical and maybe potentially a little bit more sensitive topics later. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That really, I was wanting to ask this question, hopefully it's not tedious, or annoying at this point, regarding this conversation that you were doing. And in my training, consumer notice has to be given at the first substantive. And that question seems to, oh, your credit, that's like a substantive thing. If you're in a phone call and you're talking business, you have to give the disclaimer, which is like not, I wanted to let you know that the call is not, this is not confidential information and
I'd like to read you this brief 1-page, 900 words essay on.
So that's kind of my question is how to like be,
So. Are we all being really disciplined about consumer notice over the phone?
No.
You're gonna have to figure out what that looks for you. And I think that I am telling you right now, advocating an 11 out of 10 level of importance that you need to be doing in-person consultations moving forward on every single thing. And that might let you have an off the hook of getting that awkward conversation at the consumer notice level by phone, which goes back to what does your lead to under contract process look like? Because it might look like, hey, I'd love to maybe have a little bit of a deeper conversation with you. We're going to start to maybe open up some cans of worms that could be sensitive information, which from an agency perspective, I have to be a little bit careful about doing that before I've earned the right, both from your perspective and also from a legal perspective. Why don't we get together before we go any deeper and say, like, you know what I mean? Like you might have a little interrupter there that gives you that off the hook and then you come back around and do, because now when I sit down with you, now, Danny, hey man, like we're opening some conversation here in terms of financials and some of your, confidential information. And I wanna, we should probably interrupt this. I have a document before we go any further because this is an important thing. And I want you to know how important it is to me that like as a real estate agent, we have actually rules in place in writing about how we talk about this. And this is what that document is. It's not a contract. In fact, you're the only one who signs it. I just have to acknowledge that I gave it to you, but it just gives some clarity on the ground rules for how I have to behave as we have this conversation. Now, if I take that information that you give me and you and I both agree that we should absolutely 110% work together, that is actually solidified on a contract. This is just a disclosure. Is that fair? You see, like the language that you're using is in alignment with the process. So you have to have both. You have to have the process where because otherwise you're just winging it all the time. So from a buyer consult perspective, I think if you go through that, right, offering solutions. So to your point, right, maybe somewhere in curiosity is like consumer notice, or it could be very early on. Like I could have that comment. If I have a good phone call with him and when we meet at Starbucks, I think it's a little abrupt to be like, okay, cool, before we talk about anything, here's a consumer notice. But maybe a little bit of soft talk and then just say, hey, before we get into like business stuff, I'm really excited to hear more about what's going on with you and Jocelyn and this home buying journey that you guys are on. But before we get into that, I just got to tell you that there's some rules that are in place around this conversation, right? teed up and then you, off you go. Yeah.
Kind of trick to cover yourself with that is follow up with an email, and in the bottom of my email, it states about the consumer notice.
Yeah, you can do that. Yep, that's a great one.
That's just like a little.
That's a
great workaround
Awesome.
to cover yourself, to try.
Okay. I'm gonna read this real quick. You're welcome, Ryan. I pulled this from
I'm not
Par.
gonna let them eat.
Oh, yeah, you guys wanna eat? We're like 10 minutes till the end or so. I didn't consider that. I had to be. Oh, we're gonna keep going. Let's do it. I gotta be back at the other one. I advocate for that. Both of you guys. You got a month. What are you doing? I don't know. Ramp. Oh, that's sick. That's super cool. Yeah. Yeah, I got a thing here.
I noticed there's. That this time.
You okay? No, dude, take it. All right.
When's the win?
And. If we put it. Multiply, I'm wondering if we. I think that's not a problem. Yeah, it's only a unit, just.
All right. So it's like, read this broker disclosure. I pulled this directly from the PAR site. In the FAQs. And one of the things that I've heard is, thank you. You don't apologize for settlement ever. I love it. Awesome. Thanks for coming. One of the things that I've heard is like, now my broker's trying to micromanage. I'm an independent contractor. It's not the time to fight that battle, guys. The Department of Justice has led this charge. NAR just bowed to their demands essentially. Okay, so like, this is not the time for you to be like, it's my business. It is your business, right? And you can choose to, put your business at jeopardy, but if you put your business at jeopardy, you're putting the broker's business at jeopardy, and that's not a negotiable, right? So just to be really clear, and the brokerage owns the responsibility of the agency that you either enter into or don't enter into that exposes people, right? So I put this up here because this is an FAQ that came from them, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty aggressive statement. So I wanted everybody to see that. So that came out pretty small, but essentially there's the three things that are in blue are the changes. So number one, buyers must sign a written agreement with their chosen broker before touring a home, whether in person or virtual. The agreement must reflect the terms that they've negotiated with their agent, including what services will be provided, for how much, and how the agent will be compensated. So do you, like that first one, which is including what services will be provided, do you see now why I hammer home value proposition and what your fiduciary and functionary list is? Because yeah, PAR is going to give you this blanket statement, but if you think that you're going to do a move for free program or some other type of thing that you're going to deliver as part of that, and now you're going to do a move for free program, and the buyer's going, or the seller's going to agree to a 7% commission in exchange, that's literally what they're telling you. You need to be communicating very clearly. So they're related. Understood? Number two change. The listing broker or the seller may offer compensation to the buyer's agent, but there are limitations to how that can be marketed. And clearly we all know Bright said out, right? That's what they wanted. They wanted it to be out. So figuring out other ways that you can do that. By the way, I think that one strategy that we might be employing on some of the Pittsburgh listings is getting riders that say buyer compensation available on this property. Some rider that would say that riders are cheap. We can get them at Atlas for like $5 a pop. So just throwing that out there, a way for you to be kind of cutting edge on that would be to put it on the sign. And the third change is if there's an offer of compensation to a buyer broker from a listing broker or the seller must approve the specific amount in writing, which is gonna happen on the listing agreement, right? Again, these are things that FAR already have. We already had pretty good documentation in terms of our buyer agency and seller agency. It's just, were you the agent who was signing buyer's agency at the time that you were writing your offer? Yes, I absolutely have done that in my past, so I'll fall on that sword. I'm just telling you that is not okay anymore. So that's the three big pieces. This is on the NART site. If you go through the FAQs, I added this because it's really interesting. It's like a consumer guide. That's complicated. That's complicated. But this is what NAR is telling you that, you know, gives clarity to the consumer. Holy crap, there's a lot of information on that. You guys got to be studying this stuff. So I'm going to make the slide, this will be available. But you know, when I tell you, you need to time block an hour and go into NAR and like, you know, putz around in there. This is what you'll find. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So must-haves for the buyer's agency conversations. Number one, must have signed buyer's agency before showing a home. I'm like the 40th person to tell you that. It's a must. And the reality is, everything that happens before that is all the soft, squishy stuff we've been talking about for the last two sessions, which is value proposition, curiosity, creating enough of a value that when it comes time to sign that actual buyer's agency, that it's going to happen and it's not going to be a conflict. Because if you can't articulate the value, then that first must-have is way harder. Number two, clearly agreed upon compensation for the services. What is your compensation expectation as a buyer's agent? I'm not here to tell you the rule. Ryan and I've had some conversations, like, you know, we have Pittsburgh, we have York. Like, do we put a company-wide or office-wide policy in place? Like, this is it. And Pittsburgh's perspective, no. York's perspective, like, we're not putting a company-wide policy that says our minimum is blank.
No.
I think there are offices that might do that. We're not gonna be the ones. You guys own the businesses that you build, just follow the rules. And all the new PAR forms, just making sure you guys go in there. Once again, there is another PAR webinar. This is your last reminder from me that there's another PAR webinar coming up next week. And please register for it, even if you can't be on live because they send you the recording afterwards. Please register for the last PAR webinar. Seller experience. Just to wrap up on sellers, right? How will you be holding your listing appointments now? So I gave you some anatomy of a listing appointment. It still starts with the same stuff, setting expectations and curiosity and empathy, going into the needs analysis. And then it goes into like what Jeremy's talking about, right? His plan, like how deep into your, sorry, I know you're chewing. How deep into your listing appointment are you actually showing them the paper of what the 7% versus the
It's at the end.
the end?
It's at the very end, like literally right before the listing agreement.
Okay. How long are your listing appointments?
2 hours.
Do you all hear that? I didn't even know the answer, but I knew the answer.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no way that you're running a high effective listing focused business like Jeremy is and being able to, you can't get 7% on a 30-minute listing appointment. It's not gonna happen. So I already knew the answer before I asked, right? So I'm gonna challenge you, like, are you having that deep conversation? Are you allowing the relationship, like Ryan and I used to be like yin and yang. He wanted to have a 40-minute listing appointment and I would sit there for 2 hours. We would take nothing into the listings. We took no comps to half of our listing appointments and closed at 95% because we did a really great job at creating understanding and empathy, curiosity with the customer, and then laying out a plan. That came from Sandler training, I think, a lot, but like ultimately, like that's how we did it. We, you know, so I've practiced this version of it, and now the onus is just even more important because now we've got this other narrative that's out there that is the Today Show and all the other stuff, right? So now that you put that in perspective, like if you hear somebody who's like, and let's role play this. This will be fun to role play. What's with the changes that I'm hearing about where sellers don't have to pay commissions? What are you saying to that?
Ask them what they've heard so far and what their understanding is around that topic. So you know it's in their head, but then you also kind of set it up to, you know, let me know your understanding and then I'll pick it up from there. it's kind of framing that like in a nice way, I know more than you, but tell me your understanding of.
I couldn't have written a better script.
Is this true? They never did have to, it just formalizes that.
For the most part, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. But saying it in an abrupt way can maybe have them feel unheard. So yeah,
Kevin's
it
fantastic.
was literally perfect. But
Well,
yeah.
you,
Good people.
in truth, to be in the MLS, you had to offer some form of compensation, but it was always negotiable.
Right. Yeah. So I think
That's what's changed.
So I think the way that he positioned that tees you up to say that, right? So one thing, I want you to write this word down. It's the active word. Fascinating.
What is it?
Fascinating. When customers or the public are like, I hear there's some crazy stuff going on, I heard about all these changes. Market is fascinating right now. Changes are fascinating. And the question that you asked is actually a Phil Jones script, which is, what's your understanding of this? Great.
Popped into my head.
It is I coached yesterday on that exact, he has a 3-part script for it specifically. And it's like, what information, have you heard about this? What's your understanding of this? What's been your experience in the past with this? If these are context questions that he teaches to ask. That question that you asked is the one. What's your understanding of this?
That was from Phil Jones. Jeremy, I think that's why it popped up, but now I'm remembering because I read the.
Well done.
Exactly.
Well done. So yeah, that's it, man. Like, so just, I want you to be equipped to go out into the wilderness and fight a good fight, So when you're hearing those conversations, it's like, well, I hear there's a bunch of changes or whatever, right? That's fascinating. I think, so some takeaways from today. Number one, use data to back up the truth. Because right now it's gonna be a truth versus narrative world, right? So checking the MLS, watching days on market. I think it would be pretty awesome if a bunch of KW agents start to call these agents who have high days on market and asking them what their comp structure is, and they start to get like, what's going on over there, right? But like, let's do that, okay? So number one is like, use the data, follow the truth, use the real truth. You're the professionals, guys. Like, don't let the national news tell your professional story locally. That is a huge miss, right? So that's number one. Number two, build out an intentional buyer funnel and seller funnel. I didn't specifically go to seller, but I like laid out here, but building those out, right? So when you start from lead to agreement or contract, building those out, because then when you start to do the actual appointments, which is what I have here, the 5 steps of a seller's appointment, now you can set expectations of what the process is going to look like because because you're the guy. You're not just along for the ride, okay? Have a written and clear delineated value proposition. What do you bring to the table and what's your brand? So I'm thinking of it in terms of the pillars, right? Process, experience, price, and process, experience, price, and purpose, promise. Yes. And then the buyer and seller having clarity and then role playing a little bit. So we did a little bit of a role play here, but I would encourage you guys to take that and continue to work through it, right? Continue to tackle that. And happy to, facilitate if anybody wants to, or we can play matchmaker on the Facebook group and have if anybody wants to do a little bit of a role play session. Or if you're terrified of it, then you can just run and hide, it's fine.
Because you're learning.
But it gives you some work.
I think what we're gonna find, you guys are gonna start to experience a lot of different challenges with some of these conversations, and we'll probably end up doing like a solutions or a challenges and solutions class or something like that as we start to see more or be involved with more. But to Joe's point, educate yourself now and practice. Have safe place. No one's around, like You can talk to Carly, like, do it that way. Hey, I'm gonna run this scenario by you. You just act as you're the seller of buyer.
All right, very cool. I'm good. It's 12:35. Anybody have any ahas, questions, thoughts, any takeaways from today?
I had an aha with the brand proposition and the Toms. I donate money to Speranza, like Speranza's like big. Every transaction I take and donate money to Speranza. But guess what? I tell people that I do that. The last email I send them, when I thank them. That was a big aha to me. Like I tell them that, you know, I thank them for their business and let them know that I'll be donating a portion of, you know, to Speranza and like tell them about, you know, but I never do that at the beginning. It's always, that was like a huge aha to me. Yeah.
Do both, have it at the beginning and.
But I mean, by the way, I didn't know that at all, but like, my thought is, you gotta tell that story.
I
No,
never did.
So you're telling the story multiple ways, right in the beginning, and then again, towards the end.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing your.
Marketing should include that.
If you're doing your marketing at the end, you have the picture with the sold sign and then donated to this charity.
That was a huge aha. I feel like a dummy for not.
No,
That's why we did.
that's why we do this. Anybody else have anything? Can I get one or two more?
Really like the sentence you said in the whole thing with Danny, when it came to financing, you asked, is that something you have lined up or that you need?
You're just, so Phil Jones uses the word positioning. It's not unique to Phil, but what you're doing is you're positioning, because either way, that answer is okay, right? I have it lined up, which lets you, because if that answer, is yes, I have it lined up, then you can dive into going deep and like qualifying that, like, oh, you know, tell me a little bit more about that financing you have lined up. Yeah, it's Rocket Mortgage, 4%. I sent them nothing, and like, and then you're like, okay, great, this is dead in the water. Or, you know, I need a little bit of help. Or actually, the way that in his response was a super good, valuable one, which is because I positioned myself as a helper by asking it that way. So I'm glad that you heard that. Being really intentional with your language makes a huge difference in the experience for the other person.
A lot of times I ask, who's in your corner helping you with this? And they say, oh, my brother.
Yeah.
And then I kind of.
And now it's like,
okay.
Yeah, yeah, which isn't like finding ways to ask those who questions in a way that doesn't turn it into a you versus those other people is really important, right? Like, who's gonna be impacted by this? And then, you know, who, like, I don't hate who's in your corner, but you gotta make sure you're really strategic about where you ask that question. Otherwise it turns into like, they're like, oh, my brother tells me everything. You're like, oh, now it's like, what? Do I come alongside and compete with the brother?
Yeah.
Right? Or, you know, so just, it's good. Cool, one or two more, or one more?
I was being thrown into, I had no idea Today Show was gonna be having, and I would be put on the spot in the middle of all those people, but having these conversations gives you confidence that like, I could have maybe said a couple of things better, but I hit some big points. And but anyway, it's important to come to these because you hear things. And you could have been doing this a long time, but and again, it builds confidence, I think, when we have these conversations, and I'm telling you, other people are not.
Confidence increases your value. Because this is a compensation value exchange. We're being forced to be transparent about our comp. You need to be very confident about your value. So I love that. Thank you. All right, guys, appreciate it. It's always fun. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think they changed it, go up top.
Yeah, it's like,
You can stop it.
you, Joe.
thank you.
Awesome, once again.
Thanks.
Yes.